a lot of the discussion that is going on right now is the horse race. What's this going to mean for the 2026 midterms? How many more seats can Republicans pick up? And what kind of disadvantage are Democrats in? And that's a fair discussion. And, that's certainly a reality. But this goes so much deeper than that, Edwin. This really cuts at the heart of our multiracial democracy. This cuts to the heart of the Voting Rights Act, which obviously has been rendered all but useless by the Supreme Court, which was only passed in 1965. This really takes us backwards into the 19th century in terms of where people's rights are in the South when all is said and done. When you are cutting out any kind of representation for a party, for Black Americans, that is exactly what you are trying to do. And that is a really sobering thing for us to contend with.
So I have two thoughts about that. One is to say to people, this is not a Democratic and Republican moment. If you think Chuck Schumer, God bless him, is going to save American democracy, you've lost American democracy. And I don't blame Chuck for that. This is not the Democrats' job. They're a political party. The democracy belongs to us. It belongs to us. If you want to save it, you have to save it. The courts have proven they're in bed with guys who want to turn the clock back, who want people not to be allowed to vote. Not to be allowed to vote. What is that? That's not the democracy we have fought and died for 250 years. They want to do this on the basis of race. And they say, oh, no, we don't think there should be anything on the basis of race. But what they don't say is, we're going to go have a Justice Department that says white people are being discriminated against on the basis of race. So they don't, this is all a lie on their part. So one, this is, when you hear people on news shows do the horse race, well, Democrats might get 3 seats, Republicans are going to get 5 seats, whatever that is. What they're really saying is democracy is losing seats. Where they're saying, I mean, just, no one can forget that this midterm race to gerrymander the country was launched by Donald Trump and his friend Greg Abbott. And the rest of what Democrats are doing is just defense, and they know it. And in every case where they've done it, they've gone to the voters in their state and explained it, which Republicans never did, ever, because it's not about the democracy for them. It is about retaining power, just like the CCP in China.
Yeah.
It's a party that will do anything to retain power and not use that power for our good. All right. So that's one. That's one really important thing you just have to remember about. This is not a horse race. This is about democracy, and it's not about what the Democrats will do. It's about what you will do, what each of us will do to save that democracy. And then, Susan, if I were the next president, here's a tempting thought. I might be tempted to say, on day one, we are going to enforce the Voting Rights Act, period. That decision was egregiously decided. It was decided by a Supreme Court illegitimately, feathering its own nest with powers it does not have to rewrite the laws and rewrite the Constitution. I'm sorry, we are going to enforce that law. Anybody who's elected from a district that is illegal will not be seated in Congress. And anybody who demands to keep these lines will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, period. And because that's a constitutional crisis, a terrible constitutional crisis, when the executive branch says, we don't care what the Supreme Court says, but the Supreme Court plunged the country into a constitutional crisis. They did it by taking more powers than they have time and time and time again. And you're right, it began with the lust for power after they could make a presidential election, Bush v. Gore. It got furthered when, in the Heller case, they could just take the first 13 words off the Second Amendment and nobody
rewrite it.
Right, rewrite it. So, okay.
And now they've rewritten the 15th Amendment. And
the 14th in the Anderson case, right? So they have become too powerful, the Supreme Court. They've taken powers they do not have. The same thing they complain about in the executive and legislative. Well, the executive branch, not the legislative branch, has given away its power.
Yeah. But
they gave it away because the Supreme Court told them they could be bought. Right. So this court is a danger to our freedom. And the next president and next Congress has to have real reform. And it might just take the form of sorry, guys, we don't care what you say anymore. You
Yeah.
know, decide to do your job.
So yesterday I had a really fascinating conversation with Tennessee Representative Gloria Johnson, who is part of the Tennessee Three, and she has been fighting against gerrymandering in her state tooth and nail, along with other Democrats there. She believes very passionately that democracy can be saved, and it will be saved through the South. She says not the South will rise again, but the South will rise anew. And it was a really inspiring conversation. But then, after I was done with that conversation, I had to catch up on the news. And I saw that Democrats in Virginia were deciding not to go with the nuclear option to take on their Supreme Court after the Supreme Court threw out millions of votes. There was an election and they overturned it by a judicial decision, which is not
4-3 partisan vote on this.
right. Exactly. But Democrats decided not to go with the nuclear option then. And Edwin, I'm just wondering that, when Democrats are still clinging on to the way things used to be and to norms, and they're not willing to fight fire with fire and to think outside the box and to use some of the tactics that Republicans so gleefully use, aren't we sending the message to people that really the bad guys just want this more?
Well, like I said, I'm at the point where I'm willing to use willing to say we are in the constitutional crisis we're in and tell the courts to go stuff it until they decide to do their job in a legitimate way. I would have done more in Virginia, but I'm not in Virginia. I don't know what they were dealing with really, because local decisions are hard to second guess. But what the country wants to see fighters trying to save our democracy. They want to see it from people in office and out of office. And I have no patience for half measures when somebody has put a knife to the throat of Lady Liberty. And this is what Republicans are trying to do. Despite their gerrymandering, they may not be able to preserve their congressional majorities. And then we will not forget. We will not forget this. The second part of that you mentioned earlier, which is, okay, it's not just about drawing lines, but we can move polling places and not tell you, is, ancient voter suppression. This is really, we're really in a bad place when it comes to democracy. So we have to turn out in the biggest of possible numbers. We do. I mean, they will cheat they've demonstrated that they've gone over every line that's been said about cheating. And there's no indication that they're going to stop between now and the election. They're going to keep trying. And Donald Trump, he's going to keep trying in every way he can. Because one thing he is tough. He's a tough guy. And he's not going to, we can back him down, but it takes millions of us to show up. We've backed him down from building those prison camps all over America, thank God. And they're still trying, but we've slowed it down a lot. And we can slow down he's lost 30 cases when he's demanded states give him access to the control local elections. He's not winning those.
Yep. And 30 seats have flipped from red to blue since Donald Trump was elected president. So his track record isn't good, but democracy has to be able to stand up to a bully like this. We have to be every inch as tough as he is, and more so. Yes.
And we have to, when we say it isn't just Donald Trump, but this complicit Congress that has turned a blind eye to the most corrupt administration in American history, the most dangerous administration in American history, and finally the most incompetent, drunk, disorderly, on the road for 7 months, like
Congress,
taxpayer money to ride a horse off into the wilderness.
Right. Please. And a Congress that barely passes any bills. I mean, this is the do-nothing Congress to beat all do-nothing Congresses.
I wish they'd pass no bills, but the big, beautiful bill is so damaging all by itself.
Oh, it completely is. No, you would not want them passing legislation, but they're too lazy to even do it.
They're hiding. They're hiding. They won't go to town meetings. They won't meet with Americans, but they don't need to because they've drawn the maps to get elected. We
Right.
have fewer competitive elections than we've ever had in the Congress.
Right. The only way that they can win is if they change the rules of the game midway through and where they cheat when they can. And that is not a great sign for this political party, but I mean, they're just kind of like a drunk at a casino. They're all in, and this is the road they're going to go on. They're committed to it, no matter how wrong some of them know it is. But this is really go time for us because the midterm elections are one of our best chances to try and preserve our democracy.